Hello and welcome to the Political Orphanage, a home for plucky misfits and problem solvers. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton. And today, we're going to talk about tipping. Specifically because, is it just me or is everybody asking for tips now? When I was in high school, you pretty much just tipped waiters. Now, every food truck, sales job, dog walker I encounter asks if I want to leave a tip. And yet, when I try to tip a date, they get mad at me. But still take my money. What gives? What's happening? So today we're going to explore tipping, the underlying economic rationale, why we have this peculiar institution, its benefits, and its irritations. And to conclusively settle this matter for all time, I will even put up a poll on Patreon asking whether people would like to scrap or maintain tipping as an institution. You can contribute to said poll by going to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton, and everybody already on there, let me know your thoughts. All right, to the show. Once again, we have convened the world's smartest podcasting network. I'm very excited to talk to my friends, and I'm very excited for them to help me sort out tipping, who I'm supposed to tip and why, or what I'm allowed to be cranky and stingy about. This is a topic that can be abstract, but I think is deeply personal to anyone that eats food outside of their house regularly, which is at least half of my audience and probably more than half of the other audiences. We are rejoined by Michael Kaplan. He is coming to us from Vermont. Hello, Kaplan.
Hello. I just jumped out of the hot tub with some lovely people to come talk to you, Brain. So good to see y'all.
That's like a quantum statement. It somehow sounds very wholesome and very seedy at the same time. Like it really depends on your intonation on what I think's going on there.
Well, I'll just say it's a seedy motel we're at, and the hot tub's outside, and we got locked out on our first try to go to the hot tub. There's a door. You don't shut it. That's my tip if you're at the Mountaineer Inn in Vermont. Don't shut the door. So we're outside. I sent my son around the building to let us all back in. So anyway, good to see you. We're okay.
Good to see you as well. And you are the host of Lost in America, along with Turner Sparks. Hello, Turner.
How's it going, everybody?
Good. Your vision's returned. Are we fully visible now?
I couldn't see all afternoon. I disappointed my family members by messing up things throughout the day today. But yeah, I went to an eye doctor this afternoon, and they didn't tell me at any point. They said, "Hey, we're just going to put some solution in your eyes so we can see something." Sounds good. And then I said, "No problem." But then when the eye doctor ended, I was like, "I can't really see." They're like, "Oh yeah, that's normal. You're not driving anywhere, are you?" And I was like, "No." They're like, "Oh, that's good. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see for like the next 4 or 5 hours." And it's just starting to come back. So I was a handicapped person all afternoon. But,
I had something.
My hearing improved. Nice.
So that's good. Smell.
The other four senses are really cranking.
You're tasting
right
street signs as you go.
Yeah.
I had something
exactly.
similar happen to me. Hi, I'm interjecting even though I haven't been introduced. I had something similar happen to me. They didn't tell me that my eyes would be messed up for 4 hours, and I agreed to a phone call, like a work call, on the walk home from the eye doctor. So I actually didn't have my hearing or my vision, and I was just stumbling around New York City, unable to tell where cars were, and somehow didn't think to get off the call.
And
that's the kind of dedication I bring. Yeah.
Dr. Andrea Jones-Roy, who is the host of Majoring in Everything. Hello, Andrea.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I expect tips for this appearance. Thank you so much.
We can do that. We can all plug Venmo at the end of the episode and see if we're able to accrue those. So, but before we get into it, I want to check first, just because this could influence our positions on this. Has everybody here worked for tips? Has everybody been a waiter or waitress or some kind of tip-based job at some point?
Many, yes.
Kaplan, what have you done in the tip world?
I was a pizza delivery man at the fine establishment Little Caesars in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Nice.
And let me tell you, it was in high school, so everything was in cash, but there was nothing more. I still remember the house where I got a $10 tip. It was the greatest day of my life at the moment. So I know the feeling.
Pizzas are $1.
Everybody would tip us $1.
What's 10%?
Yeah, sometimes people would give me $2, and I like those people. But somebody once gave me $10, and I that's the only pizza I never spit in or anything ever again. Those are my people. So.
Nice. That's the other ones. The tipping had an incentive to keep you from spitting in their pizza. Good. We're already learning what
to stick my hand in and take a pepperoni out or something, So
was that the last tip-based job you had?
It was, and I worked for many jobs. We're going to talk, I know, about how people are now supposed to tip based on how people don't make a lot of money. I worked many jobs where I did not make a lot of money, and office jobs, and nobody ever gave me a tip for doing my job properly. So I'm interested to know where we're going in society with that. But yes.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about like if you tip your barista and if you tip like food truck people and all that kind of stuff, because that's the thing I really want to know. And I've got some unpleasant opinion on.
You got some thoughts?
Andrea, have you worked for tips?
I sure have, Heaton, and I'm here mostly for your unpleasant opinions. So so bring them. I've had 3 main jobs that were tip based. One was I was a server at a Perkins in Western Maryland when I was in high school, and my smallest tip ever, I once was given 3 dimes, and it wasn't even. It's like the smallest coin that we make as well. So it was a real kick in the face. Though it was the 90s, so that was like $10 back then.
Wait, what was the situation? Did like you do something, or was it just a miserable get?
I don't think I was particularly rude in that case. I think it was just a really old dude. And to be fair, I think he didn't order very much. I definitely had cases where I completely messed up, but people was not the lowest tip. Right. My second tip-based job when I was in graduate school, I spent a summer in New York City, and I was a late-night host at Coffee Shop, which used to be a restaurant in Union Square. And it was very good. I had to work from midnight to 5 a.m., so that was not fun. But there was a built-in, and maybe we'll talk about this too, there was a built-in tip because it was strange hours. And the people at the place at 1 a.m. were also drunk. And so they would often tip on top of that. And so I would get double tips. So that was kind of awesome. Turner's shaking his head. He doesn't appreciate my
advantage.
Oh, I know. It's amazing. And then my last one, it wasn't tip-based, but I did get a fair number of tips, was when I lived in Shanghai and worked at a circus-themed nightclub. They would tip us when we came over with bottles of champagne and stuff like that.
But that's pretty standard. I think most people listening to the program have worked as a server at a circus-themed nightclub in China at some point.
Most people have tipped a champagne girl at a circus.
Yeah. To be fair, I wasn't the server, but yeah. I could use some tips as a professor, but no
to get good grades.
Real quick, Andrea, I think that people should do that to throw professionals off. Like next time I go to the doctor, I'm going to slip him $5 when I leave because I think it's going to blow his goddamn mind.
I think you're right.
When I worked in TV, like I thought about doing this to guests on their way out, just giving them like very quietly slipping them a $5, because that would throw off their whole day. The rest of the day, they're going to go, wait, am I supposed to get tipped normally? Am I doing a badge? Like what did I think it's a really good way to screw with people to give them $5. It's actually a good use of money.
But isn't that more like a bribe?
They do that. I just want to jump in here. In China, the way, because it's the opposite of, like, the public health is like overrun because it's highly subsidized by the government, so it's really cheap. So everyone's at the hospital all the time. So it's hard to ever get a doctor's attention. So you do bring in a stack of cash, a red envelope full of money, and you throw them at the doctor to try to get moved to the front of the line. Or if you have a family member who's sick, you tip the doctor so that in advance, so the doctor will spend extra time, because they have super limited time. So they'll spend extra time with your family member patient as opposed to these other losers who can't afford to pay.
That's the most capitalist.
I love it.
That might be cheaper than our system all the same, but it sounds horrible. I would really, really dislike that.
It's like, I've been at the doctor in China. We're way off base immediately. But you know the feeling of when you're in the old days when you're trying to get an autograph from a celebrity and there's like 100 people sticking out their paper with a pen, holding a pen, and the guy just randomly picks one and signs
I'm batting them away.
That's what it's like trying to get a doctor to pay attention to you at a hospital in China.
Always bring bribe money to hospitals.
Legitimately, you have a piece of paper that's like your book, and you're waving it in his face, and he'll just kind of pick one and then be like, you. But there's no line or anything.
It also sounds like drunk people at a bar trying to get a drink, right?
Yeah, the exact same. Anyway, should I say what I did?
Yeah.
I was a valet parker. Valet park cars in Sacramento, California, the capital, and also New Orleans, Louisiana. Ooh,
wow.
Nice. You've been a parker in 2 different states.
2 states, certified in 2 states. Yeah.
You have to be certified?
No, not really, but it helps.
You have to have a driver's license.
Okay.
Yeah, you get a diploma. Yeah. I did learn how to drive a stick shift on other people's cars that I was valet parking for them. So it's nothing like stalling out in front of someone in their car.
Nice.
I've done that a few times. But yeah, I got tipped. It was usually $2 to $3. And then if you're at like a swanky nightclub, and it's 4 a.m, maybe $10, but that was about it.
And on
you,
my
Ian?
end, I was a waiter. Yeah, I was a waiter for a little while. I was good at being a waiter. I liked being a waiter. I was a bartender, which I was horrible at. My boss called me Earthquake. I am amazed I didn't get fired from that job. And I've been a tip-based, I shouldn't say, I've been an entirely tip-paid tour guide a couple of times where, like basically busking, which is kind of like tipping, right? So I would do 3-hour walking tours in Edinburgh, and I only got tips.
You must have been amazing.
I was great. That was the best I've ever been in anything, including the program people are listening to right now. I was very, very good as a tour guide. And ironically, I'm like pushing 40 and I am still a busker for a living. My entire income comes from busking. So those were great skills.
Oh yeah, Patreon. We all work off tips.
Yeah. Well, learning how to go like, hey, I'm going to do this thing anyway. You don't have to pay me, but I'll starve if you don't. Like learning to be able to do that in a way that's funny and people like was a really good skill for me to learn, apparently, later on.
I've got another one to add, actually, is comedy, which is anytime you do a show where you pass around a tip bucket and then we divide it among the comics and everyone gets like a sticky dollar bill and a chicken wing.
Right. Yeah. You might get like nachos, or at least they validate your parking.
Once we got a cigarette.
Okay, so we've established our
bona fides,
working people bona fides. None of us are aristocrats who've never worked in the service industry. We've all at least worked at a circus or busking or as a waitstaff. Okay, great. We've got that covered. So I want to talk about basically if tipping's stupid or not and what the economic rationale for it is. But before we jump into that, I am curious as to how it started. And Turner, you seem to have an idea of the origins of tipping, and I'm very curious.
I do. This is according to a New York Times article that I remembered today. I read came out February 5th, 2021. And you might be surprised to know that tipping started in the United States when slavery ended. And it was used as a way for white people to continue not having to pay black people for the jobs they did.
We are clever. You got to give us that.
And it said, we don't pay you. Let someone else pay you. If you do a good job, the customer will pay you. But we don't want to we're not going to be the ones to pay you. Over my dead body, am I paying you? And also then women got lumped into that too when, I don't know, was there a time when women weren't allowed to work?
Or the waitressing, right?
Until 19, that comes from
but
30
either way,
so, yeah.
a lot of
yeah.
And so when we finally let women work, we said you can work, but we're not going to pay you.
I mean,
if you want to work, fine.
Beautiful country.
But you're going to do it for free unless somebody else pays you. You can go get a tip
know how to
from
flirt
these
with
other
the customer
people.
properly.
So, yeah, exactly. Hooters, waitresses, if you know how to write your name, but then for the I in Stacy, you put like a heart instead of a
smiley on the check.
That usually helps.
Can you sign your name in lipstick? Here you go.
Exactly. And then sorry, what was the year? I think 38. Roosevelt, 1938. Roosevelt signed the nation's first minimum wage law into existence in the United States of America.
Communism.
But he cleverly excluded restaurant workers because restaurant workers were disproportionately black people. So that's where it's all rooted in.
Well,
although
so
ironically,
any of you who are defending tipping, good for you. You're defending slavery.
This is, by the way, this is one of my problems with that kind of logic with the New York Times. Do you know where minimum wage?
That's what it is. How am I turning it? I'm just giving you
became
history.
woke. I love it. Welcome, Turner.
Minimum wage laws themselves came out of racist institutions, like not the FDR one, but the original minimum wage laws started in the South, I think, with railroad companies, where basically, I'm paraphrasing the racists. The racists would say like, well, white people can't possibly compete with black people because they're subhuman, so they can work for much lower wages than us. The only way we can compete is if there's a minimum wage. And they figured out that they could price out black people and basically knock them out of the market. So anyway, take that, New York Times. If you want to hire a minimum wage, you're supporting racism.
Well, and I should also say that when I worked the valet parking job, you would get paid a different amount I worked all over the city. In each city I worked in, you'd be contracted out by the company, and you got paid a different amount based off how much they thought you were going to get in tips. So the place where they thought no one would tip, we got $9 an hour.
Yeah.
But if they thought everyone was going to tip, we'd get like $2 an hour.
Right, because they figured you'd make up for it.
And even at that point, it stuck in my head like, how is my boss allowed to only pay me $2 an hour?
Right.
He's like, well, they're going to pay you. I'm like, why is that legal?
But how much did you actually make
There's
as a
a minimum
valet
wage.
on average an hour?
How much?
Yeah.
Oh, in a night?
Yeah.
Maybe like $100, something like that. But the $9 place, you'd have to, if you work 12 hours, whatever it might be, you'd get $100.
Because when I was delivering
50 to
pizzas,
75.
I was making like nothing. But in all those cash tips, even though it's $1, $2 a pizza, I still made way more than the rest of the staff at Little Caesars. They were all, in the back making the pizzas, doing real work. So they all hated me. So that's where I think they came up this pool.
Oh, you should have shared your money with them.
I should have. Well, they pool tips now. I know we're going to get to that later. I think that's why they came up with it, because they realized that might have been it. I was like the rich kid who had a car, so I could deliver pizzas or something. I don't know. but
I can speak. Okay.
Anyway.
I can't speak to why it's legal or not legal, but I can speak to the economic theories that sort of underpin the system, if we can dip into that.
Let's go.
All right. So tipping is meant to, if we're going to be on the side of tipping for a moment, giving it a fair shake, the rationale behind it is that it addresses the principal agent problem. So that is to say, the person that knows if you're doing a good job in terms of customer service is the one that's outsourced paying you. So I, as your boss, go, I'm actually just going to let the customers pay you whatever you think your service is worth, and there's very strong norms behind that, and that's going to incentivize you to directly deal with them. And then it also has kind of informational signals that are there. So I, as the manager, may not be able to watch every single person on my staff, but every customer can watch their server completely and know exactly what they wanted. And the signal also works on the other side, where I don't have to fire you. If you're doing a crappy job, you're just not getting very many tips and you're probably going to quit. So part of it's an informational signaling thing. The other bit, and I think this is probably the main reason it exists, at least in a restaurant context, is because of upcharging. Because it's not just that I, as the boss, have outsourced the wages that you make to the customer. They're paying you directly as opposed to going through me as an intermediary. I've also incentivized you to sell more products to them. Because if you're going to say, like, you come and go, our key lime pie is absolutely delicious, and you guys want coffee, et cetera, you know that the bill's going to be ran up and the tip's going to be higher. And so it ends up you get more money as a result because we're selling more stuff, and I get more money because we're selling more stuff. So I think that's the main reason it exists, at least in a restaurant context.
A third argument I've heard, and I've also heard that it actually doesn't hold water empirically, is that, I said that so slowly, is that it's supposed to incentivize better service too. Because I know they're paying me, I'm going to be nicer to them, as opposed to just be like mailing it in.
Right. Yeah. I've heard that a lot.
Those days are over. They all mail it in now.
Yeah. Do we think that's true?
Nobody's
By
nice
the way,
to me.
Like,
Nobody.
That is the typical response I hear, is that it makes better service. I think we've all traveled a fair amount. Turner, you were going to say something. What do you reckon?
Well, on this topic, yeah, I would actually. So I'm against tipping. I think that companies should just pay people for the job they're doing. I think it should be on the boss. But on this specific thing, I do think it creates better service, no matter how bad you think the service you get is. If you've ever had service in a country where there's no tipping culture at all, you're ignored for like 99% of your meal. And even to get the bill, a lot of times you have to stand up and go get it from them. And then there's not even the concept of, oh, I've made a mistake. It's not like, oh yeah, I forgot about you, I'm sorry. No, it's just like, yeah, we're not here to help you. If you want to eat, go ahead and eat. But what do I care?
Yep. I was in Mexico this time last year. I actually did a gig that Turner hooked me up with on the Yucatan Peninsula. Thanks, Turner. And was hanging out down there, and you were exactly right. I tried to kind of eyeball. They don't have a tip-based culture. I kept like a pool of what would have been 20%, and I would like dole it out to the one person that remembered to fill out my water. They would get like $40 that day. It always kind of shocked me, because I'd walk in and I'd say in Spanish, hello, I'd like to eat lunch. May I have a table, please? And they go, yeah. And then they just fold silverware very slowly for like 5 more minutes. And I'd be like, how can you be prioritizing silverware in an empty restaurant when I, the customer, have it was like, because there's no reason to do it.
Right.
Well, I will say I have a counter argument on that, which is I actually think American service is overbearing, and I like countries where they leave you alone and you have to flag them down. It can get too extreme. I've also been to places where you could literally like grab the guy and he still wouldn't bring you food or a menu or anything. But generally speaking, I like the places where even in the UK, you can sit and you can talk and no one's rushing you out and checking on. And one of the things, now I'm just really getting worked up. that I hate in American restaurants is that they say things like, "Hi, I'm Susan. I'm going to be taking care of you tonight." It's like, I don't need to be taken care of. I'm an adult. And they're saying it and they're being overly nice and saccharine because of the tipping culture, I'm sure.
You know what? I don't disagree with either. I'm in Britain all the time. I was in Scotland 3 months this summer. I don't see a noticeable difference in in service culture between the two countries. It's like when I go to Scotland, it's not like everybody's surly and mean. Like a little bit of that saccharine bit that you talked about, that's missing. But I don't find that the actual competency is affected. It's just less smiley, and I'm not terribly bothered by that.
But also, I would say in America,
can I ask this question? Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was just gonna say in America, I feel like it used to be. The way we grew up, it would be like whenever you tipped like someone at a coffee shop or a place where it wasn't normal, they would be so appreciative, and it'd be be a way to get better service, a way to feel like a big shot, a good person. Nowadays, it's so it's just like a matter of fact. You're supposed to do it. That it's like it doesn't get you anything as far as service goes.
Well, they really kind of like presumptuously flipped that little iPad around,
and they turned their head away,
20, 30, or 40%.
Yeah, they say you can sign it now. I hate that. And I always give 0.
Kaplan, you have identified my primary problem with the system of tipping in our country, which is if it's meant to incentivize good service, and it's also meant to solve the principal agent problem, that is to say that we're outsourcing your wages to me, the customer, and I can pay or not pay you. If I have such a strong psychological impulse to always give you a minimum of 15 to 20%, that doesn't work.
Exactly.
That's no longer a thing. Now it's just a
15,
weird custom we do.
That's an insult in most of America now.
50% in New York City.
Heat and hate
For
40.
No. 20% is my norm. If you really, really piss me off, maybe once every 3 years, I will give you 15%.
Oh
but think about that. That's if you're
3
doing
times.
a terrible job. I'm willing to knock it down from 20% to 15%. And that's I don't think I've ever not tipped anyone ever. Right? So at that point, you can't really say the principal agent problems is solving for the informational problems because we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
And if everybody's going to get a minimum of 20%, even if they're horrible at it, then it's not going to sort out labor in terms of people that are bad finding other jobs and so forth. So I don't think it's informationally useful at this point.
I think it's not a law, like it's not illegal to not tip, but I believe that the restaurant will like come after you if you don't tip. Like it's actually, you could be like prevented from eating there again. I don't know for sure, but I don't know. Maybe I've just ingrained it so far that I cannot fathom.
I don't think that's true.
Really?
It's
I
not
thought
a law.
they'd come after you.
Like when they give you that 20% it comes with a check, you could fight that. They can't force you to pay that.
Could I give 0? I mean, I'm not going to.
You can.
Yeah,
you
could
can.
I?
Another example. On that,
you've clearly never gone out to dinner with Gary Sparks, my father. He will.
So first of all,
Remind me to invite him out.
to your point, Andrea, I actually think that's a great example of like kind of how mind blowing the norm of tipping is.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to pay. You never have to pay. There's no law about it. But it's so reputationally damaging.
Yeah.
And it is like you are ostracized, rightly so, right? But like you think if you did not care about other human beings at all and you were passing through a town you didn't plan to go back to, you wouldn't tip. But even then, nobody does that. Everybody always tips because it's so strongly put into us, which again brings me back to the principal agent problem. I don't think it's good at relaying information. Cap, you just brought up the automatic 20% surcharge that happens on tables. If it's automatic, what's the point of it?
Right.
If it's automatically there, then you could have just built it into the price to begin with and just had everything increased by 20% and not bothered me.
And honestly, I know Andrea do this, but like the people, they don't tell you it's built in and then you pay extra. I mean, that should be, I don't know, that should be a year in jail or something.
I'm going to call this place out because it rightfully went out of business. It was called Caroline's Comedy Club in New York City.
Here we go.
And I'm the one comedian in New York who's like dancing on their grave. I'm happy they're done because I went there to see Norm Macdonald and I went twice to see Norm. I didn't catch it till the second time, like a year later, but built in is an 18% service fee. And then but they write it into where you don't even notice it. And then at the bottom, there's a line for the tip. And the second time I was there, I caught it. And I was like, oh, I was tipping on top of and then their total they give you includes the 18% they put in.
Turner, at least their drinks were real cheap, right? Was it like a real cost-effective place?
$100 cocktails.
At least it was
mostly
Norm.
water. And people are like, "Oh, I'm so upset that it went out of business. It's an institution." I'm like, they were screwing over Manhattan, New York City.
I feel like this is more common in places like Caroline's, like places that kind of do other things. I know that other comedy clubs have justified it. It's like, well, there's a separate fee for like the comedy room and the work that goes into that, or the overhead for this.
Yeah, but they're not paying the comedians.
Well, exactly. And I think, you see the same thing at hotels where they kind of add in a fee. And I think it's because you can get away with it because what you're doing is sort of housed under some other oversight. So you're like, am I paying for the show? Am I paying for the thing? Whereas a regular restaurant, it will do it too. The restaurant I worked at did it. But I think you can get away with it more when you're in something that's like offering a little bit more than just the food or drink service. It's where you see it more. Or the late hours,
but
like they sneak it in. It's evil.
Because if we were to tell the general population what comedians get paid to do spots at these comedy clubs, they'd be horrified. It's not even the price of one person's night at one audience members. We get $50 and they pay at least $50 a person with drinks and everything to watch.
This is the new slavery, actually. No,
and we get paid at most $50. Like there's, a lot of places it's like $20.
I'm anti-worker,
this is the new
but I'm
Kaplan? This is the new
pro-comic.
slavery. What you guys are doing?
Yes.
Okay, so
I'm a slave.
No, boy.
because I
What's that? Oh, my
I can
internet's
say
out.
it.
Bye, everyone.
I
can say it,
think
you can't.
because we're probably going to be ragging on tipping for a minute, and I've got problems with it too. But before we do that, though, I do think we should make some good faith arguments in front of it. So, like I've in terms of just accepting tips, restaurant servers, what comes to mind for me. In the restaurant I worked at, if I were offered minimum wage versus tips, hardcore hands down, I would have picked tips. If they were giving me like $20 an hour, I probably would have picked that. That would have been great, right? It would depend on how high you set that wage. But in businesses that are operating on a 2% profit margin, I don't know that they're going to be paying much higher than minimum wage. And so I don't know that it would necessarily be better for the server.
Bartenders make a lot more, I think, in America than they do in other countries. Or at least if you, at like a good
buy that.
like a nightclub.
When I'm in Britain, in Britain, you like bartenders. I mean, granted that they don't tend to be doing cocktails so much; they're just doing pints. But you give them like I usually give £1 per drink, or maybe £1 for every other drink. But it's normal to give like a couple of pounds at the end of the evening. Mm-hmm. So you might have had like 6 drinks over an hour, and you give £2 in a tip. Like a bartender is going to. In America, I give bartenders 20% of whatever the drink price is.
Yeah,
really.
I was like, I thought it was $1 per
when
drink.
When you buy something at a bar, I thought it was $1 a drink.
Unless it's like a sit-down cocktail that they're bringing you and
$1
making.
a beer. If they have to make you like a mixed drink or something, I think you get.
Am I overdoing this? Can I just give $1 for beer? It's not 20%.
You're doing math while you're standing at a bar.
I think it really depends on the complexity of the drink. Like a beer or like a Beam and Coke or something. I think $1. But if you're like, I'm on a Long Island iced tea and they have to stop everything, then more.
I thought it depended on if you were standing or sitting. Like if you're sitting at a table, it's 20%. But if you're just standing at the bar watching a thing.
Okay.
Anyway, Heaton, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because we brought up earlier and we didn't really have an answer for it. You worked at a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
You're saying? And Andrea as well? Mm-hmm. You did as well, right? Okay, so what did you guys do to people who didn't tip? Because you said it's like illegal not to tip, and there's always this thing that, they're going to spit in your food if you don't tip. But that doesn't make sense because you tip at the end. Right. You don't tip. How do they know?
I don't think it ever. So I did get stiffed all the time when I was a tour guide, and that was kind of built into the bottle, and you just had to develop the thick skin for it. When I was a restaurant server, I don't remember anybody ever once stiffing me on a tip. I think maybe somebody gave me 10% or something, and it would irritate you. But I don't remember ever like. It would have infuriated me, but I don't recall that ever happening. I mean, it's really psychically difficult to do that. Like I don't.
And you would blame mentally the person. You wouldn't blame your boss for not paying you a fair salary.
Because no. Yeah. I mean, the boss is going to do one of two things, right? Like let's establish this right now. If you get rid of tipping, the boss isn't going to take it on the chin. That's not going to happen. So if you get rid of tipping, all you're going to do is make the service, the food cost more. So instead of the food plus 20%.
But the food does cost more because you have to tip.
Right.
Right.
So the price would just be listed in the menu.
Turner, what I'm saying
that's what I want.
Right, exactly. That's fine. That's fine. I'm just saying that for anybody concerned about this, the consumer is going to pay just as much. Yeah. Like sometimes when people advocate for very strong labor laws, they have this fantasy that when they put this in, the boss will go, "Oh shucks, I won't go on vacation anymore," and that's not going to happen. So we're the consumer going to pay for this either way. When I was a restaurant server, if somebody had stiffed me on a tip, I would not have been mad at my boss because the arrangement was very well known. I was going in there. I was arguably charming and fun, and so I did pretty well, and the tip system benefited me. I liked it.
But isn't that such an amazing just mind game that bosses in America have figured out that now we know is rooted in not wanting to pay black people money?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that they've convinced all of us to blame the customer and not
and they
while they're
continue
paying you $2 an hour.
to benefit too, right? I feel like not only are they paying the workers less, but they also can claim lower income as well. In terms of, I don't know, we got to get Gary Sparks on the line here for the accounting.
Oh,
but
I don't know if they can claim lower income. Because I guess their costs
if
would
the,
be
if the
lower.
food cost
so
more and people were paying more, you'd be like, oh, I made more. Whereas if it's $20 that goes to the server instead, I feel like though, one of the wrinkles here with would you rather have minimum wage or make money on tips? Generally, I also would make money more on tips, with the exception of Perkins, where I made profoundly less and used to accidentally overstate my tips, and then I had to pay taxes on money I didn't even make, and it was horrible. But I feel like moving away from cash into credit cards and even Venmo has got to change the math on that, because it's worth more to get cash than to get something that you can be taxed on, and that's got to change the math around whether or not I prefer a tip or not.
That's my tip.
I don't think that it would.
If you want to give somebody,
if you're not claiming your cash, which I wouldn't.
No, I was going to say, if you want to give a server a nice tip without that 25% thing, do it in cash. Give him 18%. You can do 15%.
A couple of things. First, I don't think that if you just had I don't think there's a price difference for the restaurant, whether or not they're putting the price in the food versus the server, because the server's still a business cost. The wages are still a business cost that's mitigating against the profit margin, just as the price of the food would. So I don't think it would change. And Turner, I'm going to push back a little bit on the New York Times through you, in that I know historically there were riots in Britain at one point when the nobility, it was either Britain or France, the nobility considered getting rid of tips for valets and butlers and things, and there were riots. The working people rioted because they had the same equation that the servers had. So there have been forms of tipping that predates the sort of slavery.
I do have an answer there.
Institution.
I got an answer for you. I'll push back on the pushback.
All right.
Which is that this is all based off one New York Times article I have up right now. But they said that previous to the United States,
we always trust the New York Times here.
It was tipping was part of the culture in the UK, but it was essentially for the aristocracy as a way to tip their servants on top of the salary they were already making. As a job well done. I'm paying you a full salary, but I'm also giving you this. And then when it got adopted in the United States, we got rid of the salary or drastically brought it down below minimum wage as a way to not have to pay people.
It also sounds like that's the boss giving them the tip, which is what we would consider a bonus, right?
Yes.
If I've hired you anyway and I'm paying you a salary and then I tip you, that's a bonus.
Yeah.
All right. One more argument in favor of tipping, and then we can dissect it and ruin it. Okay. Let's say I'm a restaurant owner. It's my understanding that restaurants have very low profit margins. They're like 1% to 2%, right?
So they want us to believe, but yes,
they don't make money. Yes.
Yeah.
It's the worst business.
It's very
to get
difficult
into.
to make a restaurant work, and they don't tend to last a very long time, right? So if I have a 1% to 2% business margin, and upcharging is important to me because it's directly incentivizing every server to sell as much products as possible. If you remove that, it might be that for a few months I'm able to pay everybody $15 an hour, but down the road the business just goes out because we now have a 20% reduction in sales, and that results in a lower profit margin. We can't pay everybody. So if I were a restaurant owner, I think that's what I would say, is that it's actually for the benefit of both of us, me and the server, to have this upcharge model. Turner?
Yeah, I ran a business for 10 years, and that was, it was a food truck business in China, ice cream truck, and there was no tipping. I don't know, no one tipped because that wasn't part of it's so far outside of the culture, it wasn't even thought of, but
Imagine tipping in a Chinese ice cream truck.
We did upcharge, we incentivized our employees to sell the higher margin items on the menu, which is upcharging. And the way we did that is by bonuses. We knew how much they specifically sold every day. And so or their team, we put them into small teams, and then they would get a bonus at the end of the month based off of whoever had the highest sales and the highest margins
Gotcha.
of sales, and we kept all that stuff.
So you'd be able to keep track of like receipts and things, and you'd be able to say this guy is consistently selling more of the high-end chocolate fudge ice cream as opposed to this guy who's doing middle of the road stuff. So this guy, the first guy, gets the bonus.
Yeah, and we know it even down to if you sold all of our items equally, then the profit margin was like on the cost of goods sold was like 67% or something like that, which meant that, for example, if you sold something for $5, the cost to make that should be like $1.27 or whatever might be 33%, right? So you're making 67% of everything you're selling, 67% of its profit. But if you're upselling, if you're selling the higher end stuff, which has better margins than the average, then you can get your monthly personal margin from 67% to like 71%. So we kept track of all that data, and that's how we could tell.
Or the other easy way around this would just be...
That's why when I worked at Arby's, which was not a tip job, I would always push. I wish they were keeping track because I always pushed people to get the Jamocha shakes. But I also ate so much
Turner
of
and
the
I
food.
literally got that
how much
shake at
food
your
people ate?
instigation when we were in Dallas here about 4 months ago, Cap. We
What's in
literally
this
got that.
shake?
That's why I
Ethan
brought
and
it
I
up.
had a couple
As a
Jamocha shakes.
callback.
They were actually awful. I think they made them incorrectly for us. So they just tasted like vanilla.
Well, that's why I was a good employee.
I was going to say the other possible way to do this is just have if you want to incentivize servers to upcharge, you could just make it an obligatory 20%. So like you just at the end of you don't even have to show the customers, just the server is getting 20% of whatever the meal is.
Sure.
Although
Yeah.
then you're
but
still
you could.
kind of having tipping, but really you're having a profit sharing model at that point, in effect, as opposed to a base salary.
That's sort of what I was thinking is why not just tie it to like if the restaurant does well, you get paid more. There had to be some accountability on that because otherwise the restaurant can be like our sales are flat and never pay anyone more.
And employees hate that because they'll go, I was doing absolutely everything while everyone else was sleeping in the ice cream truck. And so we didn't do well, but it's not my fault.
That.
But there's also a difference between a restaurant, which has had this model and is a tough business. And there's so many other businesses, though, where people are not, like, you're supposed to tip your deli counter. Now, I sent you guys this article. The guy who cuts your turkey or ham, you're supposed to tip every you get a haircut, you have to tip 20%. You do everything you do in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't understand because, like, what if the guy owns the place? Do you have to tip him? I don't know how this all works. So we're tipping everyone in society now.
Yeah,
and it's not just the restaurant, so...
Andrea?
Here's one very specific argument that I can muster in favor of tipping, and I'm going to say it mainly because it makes me seem like a hero, which is on the rare occasion that I'm never going to get hired again, but on the rare occasion that I'm doing like traveling for work and someone else is paying the bill for the taxi or the meal or the whatever, I don't go wild, but I will give people 50% tips like left and right, and I feel like I'm like rebalancing the scales. That happens twice a year, so it's not like that's resolving the other issues, but I do like having
that's
that
a key
discretion.
part of our economy, expenses.
Yeah.
Well, I think the main advantage, the main argument I can make for tipping is what I think Andrea just glossed over it, but it makes you feel like a hero.
Yeah.
It's like, and then you you tell everyone about it. Whit Kaplan and I have a good friend who every time we go out to dinner with him, he goes, everybody, don't be cheap. We're tipping 40%. This is the best restaurant. I eat here often.
We got to give...
These people work hard. Of course, this guy's like a multi-millionaire. He's like, they work hard. We have to give them money.
That guy sounds so obnoxious. I'm inviting you all to a really expensive restaurant and then demanding you pay 40%.
It makes him feel great about it. And it stopped. My brother doesn't come to New York City anymore because he goes, I'm going to go out to dinner with that guy. We can't afford it.
I'm trying to figure out who this is. I'm so excited.
20% given.
My brother's kids go to...
No, if it has 20% built in, he'll have us tip more.
Always. It's 20, but that's the minimum. It's 40. My brother's kids go to public school because of him. They can't afford private education because this guy makes them tip 40%. But it makes him, I'm sure he feels great about it. He gets to, what is it called? It's virtue signaling, I guess is the term. Right?
Yeah. So like that's another big part of this, which is the psychic element, the psychic utility of tipping. You do feel good if the bartender or the server is really cute or they're fun, and you hit it off and you give them 30%. You feel like a big shot, right? That's there. I as a customer, I don't like tipping. I'm trying to put myself in the mind of a restaurant owner.
I had, like, again, if I were a waiter, it really just depends on what the alternate wage would be for me in terms of what I want. But as a customer, I don't like it. And I think the reason I don't like it is mathematically, it ends up being the same thing. If you want to have me, if you're just going to pay them 20% of the bill, or you're going to outsource it to me to determine whether I pay them 20% of the bill, it's the same mathematically to me, but it's much more psychologically taxing for me to have to determine what I'm going to pay them. Even if it's the exact same outcome, I now have to pay twice in my mind. I'm paying twice.
Yes.
I'm paying the bill and I'm paying the tip. And I don't want to do that. I'd rather just you take care of it. I know it's going to cost me the same amount.
Right,
I'd rather
do
do that.
math.
And then I'll tell you the other thing is I think that the informational model is screwed up. Like I've been a server, if the kitchen screws up, you don't not tip the kitchen. If the manager screws up and doesn't bring in enough people and I'm just overworked and there's nothing I can do about it, that's not my fault, right? So the information's not going there. I think it would actually make more sense to just go, you need to grow a spine and go tell the manager that this was a crap server. Like right now we have a system that's basically predicated on being passive aggressive. If I don't like the server, I'm going to give them 15% or less if I really, really don't like them.
Well, then you'll go on Yelp and write a bad review, though, and you'll mention the server.
Right, exactly.
In there,
maybe we should just go talk to the manager, or you could just have a form that they put out at the end. Just, hey, here's your check. It would be great if you filled out the survey. It's 3 questions. Did I do a good job? Did I do a bad job? Whatever. I think there's other ways to get that information back to the management.
Yeah, I think something you just brought up, Heaton, a second ago was this idea that we don't. It should be illegal not to tell everyone what the final price is going to be of the item. It's like, well, you can get the chicken for $20 or the steak for $28, but none of that's really $20 and $28. It's plus tax plus tip. And even at private clubs, they'll put a little plus sign, but they don't. They'll be like, oh, the dinner plus the show tonight is $75 plus. But they don't tell you what the plus is. It works out to be $111. I think that every other part of society, you have to tell someone what something's going to cost, except the restaurants.
Except medicine. Medicine would be the big exception to that.
Well, that all
Americans
depends
love
on your health
not
insurance.
letting you know.
Yeah. And also, tipping system is great. I think the only person I guess it works out if you're as someone who's a waiter and you like that system, that's fine. But the person who really wins is the owner of the establishment. Because if nobody tips you, they have you get mad at the customer. They don't say, "Oh, well, I'll make it up to you today. You didn't get a tip, so I'll kick in more." No, they're always like, "Those people should be tipping you more." No, what the gall of that customer to not give you the money I should be giving you.
I don't think that happens too much as a former server, but I will say,
they can't
Turner,
lose.
that
Is my point. It's a win-win.
They're protected.
I very much agree with you on on just how irritating it is as a consumer. So I'm in the UK a lot. In the UK, the taxes are built into the price. Whether you're at a convenience store,
China was as well when I was there.
You're at a restaurant or whatever. If it says £3, I don't like. In America, I never know how much anything's ever going to cost ever because there's going to be a different state sales tax. There might be a municipal sales tax on top. I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, God forbid they just built a stadium
but it's all
downtown,
less than the English
and now
tax,
there's
which is
this other
17%.
tax,
Exactly. And
airport tax.
The ideological argument for that is that the owner, I'm not getting that. Uncle Sam's getting that. Why should I have to do it? But as a consumer, it's really irritating. As a consumer, I would prefer to know what it is up front, and I would love it if it was a round number. I would love it if it were £2, $2.
Well, and I've experienced both where I've had friends come here and then go to buy something and then not have enough cash because it said it was $2.99 and they have $3, but it ends up being way more. And I had the reverse happen when I was in the UK. We all went out. It was a group of 6 or 7 of us went out to dinner. And at the end, the bill came and we divided it up. And as Americans, I'm used to that moment being extremely stressful. No one pays enough, even without someone saying everyone pay 40%. It's like, no, everyone's like, well, my thing was 12 and theirs was this. And this time we all just paid and walked away. And I was like, whoa, we must have gotten this wrong. And it's just because the price was what we all thought it was. And we didn't have to do all this extra math.
Andrea,
and as you get into bigger groups, it's a mess.
Trying to be the person on the other end. It's stressful for me too. I don't drink alcohol. And to go out to dinner with their friends and they all have 19 martinis and then the bill comes and they're like, I don't know, what do you think, $300 a person? I'm like, I had a $31 steak.
I drink very little, and here it comes. I'm vegan, and so the same. I'll get a side salad for $3.99, and everyone is having steak, and it's like, oh, let's just split it. And you're like, oh, it's brutal.
Yeah,
And
meanwhile,
I makes me
Pat
not
was
wanna
getting
go out.
hammered
Yeah.
off my money.
I live in
You gotta,
Texas, so
you gotta hang out with vegans.
I live
Yeah.
in Texas, so I eat meat all the time, and I've got kind of a small drinking problem, and I'm not very good at math. So this
works out
you
for
see
you.
how it's difficult
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, you're
He
winning.
needs money, send him tips. So that's the reason we're all here today.
Well, to go to another one though. I did prefer to be making tips when I was a tour guide, because if I knew the boss, if he was going to pay me, he offered to do it. He was like, I'll give you guys, I think it was £20 an hour. So like it'd be for a 3-hour tour, you get £60, and which is not bad. And I had tours that did that, but I also knew that there would be those tours where a retired couple would love me, and I reminded them of their grandkid or whatever, and I'd make 120 quid. And so I like doing it. That said, this brings me to the biggest revelation I want to have on today's episode. I think a substantive part of the problem with the ambiguity around tipping is that we're actually talking about two phenomena using one word. We use the word tip to refer to customer outsourced wages, which is what we're doing with servers, where you the server, or you the customer you're determining the salary of this person, right? You're the one doing that. That's one phenomenon. The other one is job well done. I am not expected to do this, but I'm so impressed with you that I'm giving you a bonus on top of your salary, right? These are two different phenomenon, and we treat them like they're the same thing. I think it would actually be very healthy to switch that. So like, I don't feel I need to tip baristas unless they do an extraordinary job. They're making they're making a salary that's not tip dependent. But if they do a great job, where we hang out for 3 hours, I'll give them a bonus, right? But that's different. The tip,
or it's like you get the free coffee card. That's when I tip.
We need another word for this, because you're right.
When you hit 12 free.
Okay, so I know that there used to be a term called vale, VALE, which is what the peasants revolted on the nobility at for suspending.
Let's go.
So I don't know whether that was the bonus or whether that was the outsourced wages.
It sounds like the bonus.
But okay, bonus is a good one. We use bonus, right? Here's your
bonus is when the employer pays it. That's my issue with that. One is a tip, and one is wage compensation, is what I would offer.
Yeah. So wage
be
compensation.
No, it should be called money the customer has to pay you because your boss won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what
literally
it should say
wages.
on the bill.
Maybe just wages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. Why not?
Salary.
I do think splitting those would be very helpful. I
agree
think
with you.
that would
I like that.
And then that would also, like, I hate the I really do not like it when I go to a food truck and the person makes direct eye contact with me and goes, "Would you like to leave a tip?" No, you're not a server. You didn't go over the options with me. All I'm doing is I'm telling you a thing and giving you a card. I don't want to tip you.
No, that's the uncouth way to do it. No, they're supposed to say, like, "Would you like to sign?"
Yeah.
Even though it's
You don't even
not a
mention
sign,
the
you're
tip.
just pressing a button.
Yeah, good work. Good call, Cap.
Yeah, and then they put it over. They do. You mentioned earlier. They do that turn. They show it to you. Do they have Square in other countries? Like, does Square in other countries not have the tips there? Do we know?
When I was in Britain, it was weird. I had to request, because I was over there recently, I had to request to tip people. So like, they just didn't, it's my understanding that in Britain, it's pretty regular to tip 10% on sit-down meals. But even then, I would
but at a counter, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'd pay my bill and then I'd go, "Can I give you a tip?" And they'd go, "Oh, yeah, great, thanks." But I'd have to specifically request it. But it wasn't the default state as it is over here now. And people play with the default.
I remember in the Czech Republic one.
Go ahead, Eden.
They play with
Sorry,
a
go
default
on.
where you get the option of like 24%, 19%, or 5%. Like I saw that the other day. So like I'm probably going to do 20%, and you're now giving me 24 or 19%. I know what you're up to. I'm giving you 19%. You were trying to trick me into overdoing it. No, you got 19. You screwed yourself out of a 1%, jerk.
I hope you said that to their face.
I did. I threw all my stuff. No, I'm very passive aggressive.
No, I was just gonna say. I remember I was in Europe once. I think in the Czech Republic, and I left a few euros or whatever tip because they were really nice. And I was like, "Well, we're an American. They probably think I don't know." And the person ran
that's
after
happened to me too.
and just thought I had left money. Thought I lost money. I was like, "No, that's for you." And I would just love if that was the feeling in America.
Absolutely
just once.
never.
Like, "No, you sure?
Yeah. Well,
You got a $3 coffee and you're leaving me a $2
Yeah.
tip? Are you
well,
sure?"
restaurants, at least
No.
in New York City,
Never.
restaurants are getting squirrely about it now, even more so because there is a movement and murmurs around like, oh, tipping is like not good for it's pro restaurant owner, and we should be not tipping and moving away from all the progressive spots are doing this thing now where they say we're a tip-free restaurant, we're a tip-free hair salon, we're tip-free whatever. But
Right, Danny Meyer started that, right?
And
Is it Danny Meyer chains where he would? He wouldn't
some
have tips?
places exactly, and some places I think do it for real, like it's built into the prices, and you pay what minus the tax issue, but otherwise it's done. But increasingly, I'm seeing places where they're like, "There's no tipping. Do not tip us, but know that we will add a 20% service fee." Like Turner was saying at Caroline's,
Right.
a 20% service fee that we split among all the restaurant workers, and like. That's a little different from a tip because it's not discretionary. I'm still paying 20% more than what's listed on the menu. It's
Yeah.
also different because I guess the cooks get it in addition to the servers, which is, I think, maybe more fair, but bad for servers.
No, but they cooks get it everywhere. They pull
I think it
tips,
depends on
don't
the
they?
place.
It depends on the
Also,
place.
That's what we've been told.
theoretically,
All right.
they should make it 20% higher. Theoretically, if you buy a $20 piece of chicken, then all of that money is somehow getting back to everyone who works in the company.
Right.
Right? That's
Right.
the whole point of a business. Is you have to pay salaries.
But it just feels like you go there and you think, oh, there's no tip. And then they're like, oh, actually, there is. We're just calling it,
Yeah,
wage worker compensation.
There's
I went to
an
another place.
obligatory tip pool as opposed to a salaried wage.
Right. Well, I went.
It's like if somebody helps you move a couch or something, and they do a really good job, and you're naturally going to give them money. That's like a tip for them doing something for you. It's something different when you're talking about this.
Here's the trickiest one I've seen. This was recently. A place said, okay, we automatically add a 20% tip, and they called it a tip. They said, we automatically add a 20% tip to the bill, but you can tell the server if you want it to be less, and they'll adjust it for you. And you're like, come on, like no one's
That's
ever
like a
going
lot.
to do that.
Now you're an asshole. Yeah.
But see that there I think is actually kind of useful because the threat of potentially having your tip taken away is going to have some utility on the server, but is extremely unlikely to happen. I think that it would probably have about the same consequence of like no one's going to do that, right? The person who's going to do that is also the person who's going to call the manager and say like you need to fire this person. So it's going to have the same effect either way because the only people that are ever going to do that are the people that are completely unconcerned with pissing off their server and looking like a jerk and that kind of thing. So I think it'll have the same outcome. I don't have a problem with an obligatory tip if it's built in because like what you're really talking about there is just profit sharing, which like is oftentimes what workers are agitating for with big companies. So having a profit sharing model, I don't mind so much. As a consumer, I just want it to be. I don't want to have to do that much math, and I don't want to have to like debate the stuff in my head.
Yeah.
Turner?
Yeah. Just listening to all this over the past hour, do we think that because I think you brought up this idea that all these restaurants all run on a tight margin anyway.
Yeah.
And so they almost rely on paying their staff $2 an hour so that they can stay in business. Do you think that the president and the government of the United States know something that none of us know? Or like that Bernie Frank or whoever those people, Dodd Frank, that if whoever those assholes are.
Great senator.
I was like, is that a
Do they know that
Dodd,
if
those
we got
people.
rid of tipping in America and all of a sudden the
Barney
bosses of
Frank.
these restaurants had to pay the full amount to their employees, that it would crumble our economy from the inside out?
So let's
They would
let's
all go
back
out
up.
of business overnight. The NASDAQ would tank and then we'd all be poor.
Again, I don't think that it's not like right now owners of restaurants are getting more money because they don't have to pay their employees. What they've done is they've outsourced the salary to the person. The salary's still being paid.
Right, they would raise the prices of the food.
Yeah, but then less
otherwise,
people would be
is what they
going
would
to the
say.
restaurant when they raise the price of the food.
That's exactly right. If they hold on, Turner.
Maybe, I don't know.
The effect is the same. You've got $100 meal, and I am going to pay my employee $20. Instead of doing that, I said, you, the customer, I am deputizing you in charge of their salary. You get to pick whether you give them the $20 or not. But I, the restaurant owner, am not keeping some extra money as a result of this transaction. So I think the economic outcome from this would really boil down to upcharging. But if you were to suddenly have us all switch to a salaried-based model, I don't think that employees would be making less money or more money, and employers would be making less money. I don't think the employer side of the equation is going to.
The employer's inherent cost would go up by a lot. But
the price of the menu would go up.
The price of the menu would go up, and so probably less people. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe not less people would eat at the restaurant.
Possible too. It's possible that people are getting suckered in right now because I go there and I'm not thinking about the tip. That's possible. I'm glad you've identified that, because this is one of those things that I think, like Senator Dodd-Frank that you mentioned earlier, like fundamentally doesn't understand.
Bernie
which
Dodd-Frank.
There's this idea that I can legislate, you, the owner, you now have to care about the economic well-being of your person. Not I'm requiring you because of these incentives, you have to pay them X amount, but you have to want to help them. And no government can ever do that ever. The government on no planet can make a law that changes the contents of your heart or changes what you want to do. And most of those laws like that are predicated on that. The idea that, minimum wage is one of them. It's price fixing. And the idea is that you're gonna pay your employees more out of your pocket, which never happens. You either increase what you're making all of your consumers pay, so you're passing it on to the consumer, or you're automating your employees and that kind of thing. So I think that's possible, Turner. I think that the upcharge would probably be the big thing. To kind of flip it, the thing I'm curious about is, why is this not happening now? Like, if we all agree that tipping is irritating as consumers, and we would like to not have to deal with it, and it's happening in New York, why hasn't that model proliferated at all? I would go to a restaurant where I didn't have to worry about tipping. It sounds great.
I think it's because we're all idiots. And on average, like, basic behavioral economics says that unless we make it nationwide and all of a sudden all restaurants have to pay and you can't do tipping and we get it that way, people are just, we're idiots. And we look at the price on the menu in one restaurant and we look at the price on the menu in the other restaurant, and we'll go to the one with the lower price, even though we know that there's more tip, because we don't do that math. And on average, I think these restaurants will lose out if they do it unilaterally. And I think the restaurants I could be wrong about this, but the restaurants that are doing this in New York City are quite expensive. And I think they're in a city where people are paying attention to this stuff, and it's a very progressive place, and it's virtue signaling of its own kind. And I don't know that would be able to work. Even if you did it statewide, I bet there would be people who are like, well, I live on the border of New Hampshire and Vermont, I'm going to go eat in Vermont because it's cheaper. Like, it's not, but we're idiots. We're all idiots. That's why.
I think that
is that an argument?
if I was a lobbyist for McDonald's,
let's go.
This is where I would be spending all of my lobbying money. Because right now, it is wildly cheaper to eat fast food than it is to eat at a restaurant that has you tip. But no one thinks of it as wildly cheaper because they don't include the tip when they're thinking of going to TGI Fridays. They don't think of the tip part. They just think of like, well, it's a $14 to $12 burger at Fridays or a $3 burger at McDonald's. Really, it's a $20 versus a $3. So McDonald's should be pushing hard at the government of the United States to force everyone to put the real prices on the menus.
Interesting take.
Interesting, but isn't that a completely, like, the person that's running the till at McDonald's?
Because then more people will eat their food because it's wildly cheaper.
But
I think the person taking your order at McDonald's is functionally no different than the person checking you out at the grocery store. Like, you're not dealing with a waiter, you're dealing with somebody running a cash register.
Right.
That's what
they're
saying.
phasing those people out.
Yeah.
They're automating all that
saying
stuff.
I'm not saying start tipping in McDonald's. I'm saying that they clearly run a very good business with no tips at all. They pay all their employees and a minimum wage or more, whatever they make, and they don't rely on tips.
Yeah.
So then they should force everyone else. No, the managers make more than minimum wage. There's
but
plenty of people
not the employees. Yeah.
Managers are employees.
So
I mean, have you ever worked anywhere?
People at the register make minimum wage. I've worked at they make minimum wage, the people at the register.
I never said the people at the register. I said the people who work there. Anyway,
I meant
you understand what I'm saying, right? Kaplan ran me off halfway through my point. But the point is...
I don't quite understand. So you're saying, Turner, that it would be in McDonald's interest to require businesses to itemize where all the costs are so that people make that calculation in favor of McDonald's?
No. It would be in their best interest to make the restaurants give you the actual price of the product on the product, which would include the tax, include the tip. Or maybe include the tip. I don't know if include the tax, but because that's what McDonald's does. So why not? So if everyone else is doing the same thing, you could see that actually it's much cheaper to work there.
Like, it already looks cheaper to go to McDonald's in a sit-down restaurant, and this would make it even more obvious.
That's my point.
I feel like as a consumer, I'm aware that McDonald's is cheaper than a sit-down restaurant. I don't need any help for making that calculation.
Turner is saying it would seem even cheaper.
Even cheaper.
Relative. because you would be, all right, everyone increase your prices because to incorporate tips, and McDonald's and any other place that doesn't have tipping would say, great, it stays where it is. And so you're like, oh,
yes,
wow.
That's my point.
Okay.
It's
Thanks,
the first
Andy.
thing as a coastal elite, I do not go to McDonald's, but now I might. Now that Turner is pointing out how much cheaper it is.
It's a wonderful restaurant.
I'm going to go there
that
now.
article I read on tipping mentioned how, like, it was a very coastal elite article, and it mentioned how, like, part of the reason you should be giving 20-25% to all these people is because of inflation. But in my head, I hear that and I go, well, if that means that the restaurants are charging more money to begin with, so the tips are higher. Yeah. And so, yeah, they're making even more than ever. So again, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm going to McDonald's for dinner tonight because I got to figure out where we're going.
I think you're right about that. The what was it? Was like Grub Street or something? I can't remember the article.
Yeah, I mean, the logic made no sense to me. I'm like, the waiter's making more money then because of inflation, right?
If all of the things in the supply chain have increased in price, and that's reflected into the price that I, the consumer, am paying, and I'm still paying 20% of that, the server's making more money based off of that.
Go less, actually. I bet that at 15% we go.
So can I run through a few things with you? One, apparently I'm overpaying bartenders. I should just be paying $1 per drink unless it's a fancy cocktail.
Yes.
I think that's right.
I think you should pay a couple dollars a drink on a cocktail.
And unless it's like Turner said, like a sit down, a bar, but you're like getting table service and it's like cocktails and all that.
Or if you're sitting at the bar for a couple hours versus, I'm thinking like you're at a bar, like a busy bar or nightclub, you're going up and getting one drink, you know?
$1.
Okay, especially since you're so good looking that you're getting, the bartenders are serving you.
And as a group drinker, you will just save me a lot of money. Thank you.
Definitely not 20%.
Okay, thank you. This is great. Great. Uber drivers.
I give like $1. I did not do this 20% thing.
I make a big distinction on whether they get your bag out of the trunk or not, because I usually only use them when going to the airport.
I only use them for airport drives as well. And I actually will also make a distinction on like if it was like miserable traffic and I ruined their whole night because I tried to go to JFK at rush hour or something.
Well, and also
I blame them for that.
Yeah.
No, but I want them to do a good route and not just follow the GPS. If I tell you go down this street, it's better, and they don't listen, well, there's no tip.
I don't usually tip Uber drivers. I do sometimes, but kind of rarely. When they created Uber, the president of the company said
the whole thing was no tipping. Yeah,
we're not tipping. They make money.
We only want people to tip if they did an exemplary job, which is what I do. I treat it like a bonus. If someone's really cool and I really like them,
that's how I treat it.
They do something extraordinary.
I often forget, if I'm honest.
Like a bonus.
Yeah, because you get out of the car and you don't think about it again for 3 weeks until you have another Uber, by which time you've moved on with your life.
Yeah.
What about, do you leave money for maids at hotels?
No, I probably should. I never have cash.
Well, no. I used to.
And I forget.
I'm in a hotel. I wanted to ask you guys this. I always used to leave a few dollars a night, like $5. I was a good tipper. But now they don't come in the room anymore. So am I, like, they don't come, they only come if you ask for something. They don't come while I'm here the entire time to make up the room. So am I supposed to tip now tomorrow when I check out? I don't.
No.
I'm usually only staying in hotels. I say 90% of the time if I'm working at that hotel or in that town as a comedian. And so therefore I'm like, no, I'm working too.
But those people
man.
make nothing,
Everybody
I think. And they're all like, oh, I don't know.
I rarely tip maids, but I probably should. This is new to me. I didn't even know you were supposed to do this, but you're supposed to leave like $1 on the counter.
I only know my dad was very, he's still alive, but when we would travel together when I was young, my father was very good about leaving a few dollars, even in the 90s when, again, that was like $1,000. And so I know that I should. I have no excuses, but I forget and I don't have, what am I going to do? Just leave a Venmo QR code, an anti-QR code so they can withdraw? It's not going to happen.
You don't have money. That's a good excuse.
All right. What about, so every once in a while I board Wallace at my dog at a dog boarding place here in Austin. I pay them. It's, in my opinion, rather expensive. And then when I leave, they go, would you like to leave a tip for the group? And I go, of course. And I put in $1 because they've asked me and I'm a coward. But I also feel like I've already paid for this thing. So I don't, and like Wallace can't fucking tell me how his time was.
Right.
Like if Wallace goes, we had a great time, then I'd give him money. But I don't know. I'm not the guy that was in the cage. So I don't know. I don't think I should have to tip him. What do you think?
I think you tip the dog as a dog owner. I'll say when you get a haircut, I treat it like a human haircut. I give, and my dog's haircuts are way more expensive than mine, so I tip like $10 because. But on a boarding, no, that's their job. They're just doing their job. No tip.
Yeah. Okay. Why do we tip barbers? Because they're like my barber makes it's a pretty good price for what I pay.
It's now $75 to get my haircut in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
it's so expensive.
It's like I think I pay like here in Austin it's like $60, and I always tip. Why am I doing that?
Well, and you're supposed to tip the person who washes your hair, which I didn't know until recently, and now I
you tip
overdo
the
it.
shower.
Out of guilt.
If you're in a salon, we don't do that in barbers.
Oh yeah, man,
I
it's
see.
the
Yeah,
same
right.
person does all of it.
But I always tip, and I feel weird. I mentioned this earlier, but the guy owns the place, so then I'm like,
Well, I was just going to say,
What-
mine is the same arrangement, and I'm like, why am I tipping you? You set the price, but I feel like I'm not going to not tip exclusively because it's a repeated interaction, and that's my
Same.
my argument for.
It's a
for
repeated,
wallets
and it's
is
an
like-
important interaction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your hair, they can screw you up. They can just
I tip
chop off
for
part of
those
your head.
exact reasons because I'm being bullied into it.
Interesting.
Fear.
Hold on. The repeated
In
interaction
fear.
makes sense, Andrea, because
Yeah.
I got a haircut when I was in New York. I flew through New York on my way back from Scotland. Went to my old hairstylist there, who owns his business, and I tipped him. And I always partly one time I tipped him a little bit less than usual, and he called me to see if I was okay, and it terrified me. And so I've always like give him the exact same amount. But I also know he's going to squeeze me in. We're buddies now. There is a because there's repeated service. I am incentivized as the consumer to give him a bonus to ensure good service. Interesting, which feels a bit like a hostage scenario to me. That
You could get your hair cut somewhere else.
That's
Now
true.
you're getting
That's
it.
true.
But,
The hostage
but again,
thing is
that's
the key.
different from the wage compensation. That's the distinction.
Yeah, now it's on me
and
as
I would
opposed
say
to them.
the last thing I would say is that the hostage feeling is like the problem. Like I like to like how in Goodfellas when you go in and you go to the back room and you get the nice table and you're given $10 each time. Like my grandfather used to, every time we go to a ball game, he would tip the usher and they'd give us better seats. And I thought that's so cool. Like that's the way I want to be, but I don't want to be like bullied into like
Right.
just like obligatory. Like I got to give you money to this or you're gonna.
Now it's a
my
mafia
ear off.
situation. Like in El Salvador, Kaplan and I went down there. They would have one of the MS-13 guys it'd be the end of every block. And when you came home from work, this is true. When you come home from work at night, you have to give him $5 just to get into your home.
I don't think they call that tipping though. I think they call it.
Well, it's the same concept. It's out of fear. It's no different from
It's not-
giving your barber
It's
might
true.
as well work for MS-13 when he's like, give me money or else you get the
The
better.
discretionary spirit is lost when you fear for your life.
Yes.
I think.
Great point.
When I was in Albania a few years ago, which is, from what I can tell, an entirely bribe-based economy. The whole economy is just a series of weird bribing schemes. And like you have like students leave money underneath their essays for their teacher. They bribe their teacher.
That I support.
You bribe the mayor, and I was really aghast at this. And they were like, don't you bribe your waiters? And I was like, no, we tip our waiters. And they're like, well, how's that different? And I was like,
No, I
interesting.
wish it was a bribe. I wish it was so they would do something better. It's really just so they won't do something worse.
Yeah.
Okay,
If you tip
so,
up front, that would change things.
So let's
That
go
would
and
be.
wrap
That's a
up
great
here.
idea. Tip up front.
Is a final
Wait,
bit.
Can
Everybody,
I ask one?
Yeah.
Do you guys give, this is off tipping a little bit, but do you give money at the grocery store when they're like, oh, $1, round up $1 to give to the kids in Uganda
no.
or whatever?
Not
I do.
unless
Okay, good.
I'm feeling guilty about something else in my life, and then I'll compensate.
I regularly contribute
Like go to
every
church.
month to multiple charities, and then there's a lump sum that I keep at the end of every year. I have a bank account that's just charity that auto deducts every month, and at the end of the year, I determine based on Charity Navigator a number of things where that would be best spent. So if I'm at a checkout line and they go, hey, do you want to give money to this organization you know nothing about? You don't know what their overhead is. You don't know if they're pissing it away on advertising or if it's a scam. No, I'm not going to give you money. It's probably going to go better to this thing that I've like. But when in doubt, buy mosquito nets in Africa. That's the best thing you can do with your money. Like, it's great. You save lives. Just give money to mosquito nets in Africa.
Here's a question for you all. This is basically not a tip, but it made me think of it. What about when homeless people come up to you and ask you for money?
I've got this.
Yeah, I feel like Eden does.
I will never turn. If somebody says I'm hungry, I will buy them a sandwich or something. It usually costs me a lot more than if I gave them $1.
Yep.
I know and love some people that have addiction issues, and I do not want to help fund anybody's addiction issue. That is a monster that I don't want to put money in. So if I don't know you, I don't know where that money's going to go, and I'm not going to give you money. But I will go get you a sandwich, and I'll end up spending like $12, $15. But I don't give anybody change. And a lot of the time what happens is somebody's very thankful and they're like, oh, great, would you get me $20 worth of stuff? And I have to go, I'm going to get you one Subway footlong sandwich and a drink and maybe a cookie. And then I'm just not going to give you anything more than $15.
That's pretty good.
And a cookie.
I'm
Not
doing
even a
okay
6-inch.
to the point where like, they're having regardless of what the situation is, they're having a really tough day. I can afford to buy them a sandwich. I'll do that. But I know exactly where it's going, right? But when they're like, can you give me money? I'm like, look, I'm sorry. It's a policy. I never give money to people I don't know. I'm not going to do it.
I ask if they pool their tips with other homeless people, and then I had a homeless person recently who told me he was on Venmo, by the way, and I was like, "What? Then why am I losing money?" You
a lot of Venmo
And,
homeless.
I've seen some with Square.
Wow.
They can
Also,
take credit
my
cards?
goodness, per our last roundtable, we should have said unhoused people people experiencing homelessness. That's what we're supposed to
Yes,
say.
you're right.
That's the new term.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cancel you for bringing that up.
So
Yep.
to round it out, what would you guys like to see change? And also, would you just like to see restaurants do it or make it a law? I'll go first. I would love to go to restaurants where this is all built in and I have to think about it, but I don't want it to be a law.
I'll go next.
Yep.
I guess. I don't care. I agree with Heaton on the first one, but I also want it to be a law. I want
So you'd
nationwide
outlaw
law.
tipping.
Tipping's done. Over. It's a thing of the past. We got rid of slavery. Let's get rid of tipping. Let's get rid of everything that goes along with slavery. And you're free to disagree, like I said earlier with that. But that's what I think. And yeah, it should be a law. And then we all know it should be, you should have to put the actual price of stuff on the menu.
Turner just persuaded me by reminding me of slavery. I was going to land somewhere between the two of you where it was like, it should be a law that you have to pay the minimum wage and restaurant. You can't be compensatory payments, but I was going to allow discretionary tipping if you wanted to. But I think Turner's right. The slavery legacy has been a stain on this country for too long.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. Let's just
Minimum
pay what's
wage
written
came
down.
out of racism too. You gonna get rid of minimum wage?
All right.
Hey, we got a slave owner over here, everybody. You're either with me or you're with slavery. Kaplan, what's your choice?
I guess I'm gonna go pro-slavery because I just want things. I like to go back to how it used to be. Bring me back to 15% tips so I can feel really good when I give 20, and eliminate all tipping for everything else. I don't want to tip a coffee shop ever again. I don't want to tip a deli counter. I don't want to tip an Uber driver, taxi cab. I tip, but yeah. So I just don't. What
about door guy at a fancy hotel?
Oh, that one stresses me out.
We didn't bring this up, but when you go to the hotel and they help you with your bags, I'm the person who's like, no, don't help me.
Yeah.
And I'm like carrying. I'm with my whole family. I'm like 17 bags. I got my dog and all these things. I'm like, no. I get so mad because then it's all this pressure, anxiety. Do I even have cash on me? Do I what am I gonna do? And the valet car. That's another thing. Do you guys tip that?
Well,
I don't have a car.
This literally is a Curb episode, but it's not just so the guy who carries your bag isn't the guy who opens the door, and sometimes they pass the bags off to someone else who shows you your room, and so it's like 3 or 4 people you got to break off before you get up to
and
your
then
room.
it's like you end up tipping the person who did the least amount of work because they're the last person you see. They're the person you see. Like when I've been on business trips, Andrea, I like to bring you up. Then I'm like, I got all this money just handing it out like a rock star, but no. I would get rid of all these tips other than I'd like to feel good. I don't want to make it
that
illegal,
on the air, by the way. Isn't there a lawsuit investigation going on right now?
Well, no, but this is for work. This is allowed. It was like real money. It was real people doing real jobs for me. So anyway.
Wait, real quick, Turner,
no one would have noticed that.
if I'm a server at a restaurant where I am going to make more money on tips, you would want to outlaw that even if I wanted to do it?
Let's go with sure. Yeah. Why not?
Okay. All right. I like the heady differences. I do not trust Senator Dodd-Frank to organize the economy. And
Bernie Dodd-Frank.
Bernie
Thank you.
Guys, can I ask a question? I'm about to go to dinner in Vermont, and I'm going to wait like 2 hours for a table because they have like 3 restaurants. Should I try to tip the person to get my table?
That's called a bribe. I'm for those. Those should still be allowed
should I give
under
a
my
20,
new America.
a 10? Because my grandfather, I heard, actually
20.
didn't give a lot of money. He was
20.
just charming about it.
You give it
How much should I give here?
20.
20?
I think it's 20.
And then how
Let
much
us
do I
know
tip
how
on
it
the
goes.
meal?
I did. You guys know how I love to go to Marie's Crisis?
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, there was a gal that was joining me there, but if you get to Marie's Crisis after 8 on a Thursday or a Friday, it's an hour-long wait. I'm a veteran. I already know this, so I was in there by 6 o'clock. She came in, and she was way at the back of the line, so I went to the door lady, and I went, hello, have you ever accepted a bribe before? And she went, what? And I went, I'm going to give you $20, and there's a young lady at the back of the line. She's in a red sweater. You're going to let her in. Does that sound good to you? And she went, this is just weird. I'm going to let her in.
Yeah.
Didn't even require
to get the money.
Apparently me being like John Cleese was very off-putting in this transaction.
I have so my friends are 2 comedians, Steve Simone and Ari Shafir, used to work as door guys at the Comedy Store in LA. and there'd be like a big line on Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset, whatever it is, where the comedy store's on. You know, think of Hollywood, nightclub, line of 100 people to get in. And they would tell people as door guys that if you tip me $20, I'll get you a front row seat at the comedy show. And so people would, and meanwhile, no one wants to sit in the front. Like it was always impossible to fill the front. And that was their way of filling the front by getting $20 and putting people in the front.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Okay. Tipping is allowed for that purpose only. That's my new stance. The bribing.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been a wonderful conversation. I think I learned I'm paying too much on alcohol. And otherwise it remains muddled. But I very much enjoyed talking to everybody. Does anybody have anything they'd like to plug?
Just our Venmos, you know?
Captain 44, Venmo me if you like this episode.
Yeah, I will. Kaplan and I, we have a real plug. We're doing March 2nd. We're doing another screening of our show where we went to El Salvador. So Kaplan and I filmed self-produced, self-financed a pilot. No one's given us a TV show, so we said, let's go create one ourselves, film a pilot, and try to sell that pilot to networks. So we're sending it out to comedy festivals and everything right now. But we went to El Salvador last summer, hung out with the stand-up comedy scene down there, all the comedians, put on a show with them, the first bilingual show in the country, English and Spanish, and learned what it was like to live in a country where Bitcoin is your currency. And now we have a 47-minute pilot episode. Think of halfway between Insomniac with David Tell and what's the other guy's name?
Anthony Bourdain?
That's it. Anthony Bourdain. No, parts unknown. One of those. But it's one of those, but funny.
I've seen it. I saw a preview. It's awesome.
How can people check it out? How can they get in on this?
Oh yeah. So go the only way to watch it's online. So it'll be screening at March 2nd at 9 p.m. Eastern, and then I'll tell your listeners only. We're probably going to leave if you can't make that exact time, we'll probably leave the stream up for a couple days so you can watch it at your convenience. And you go to patreon.com/Lost in America. Lost in America is the name of our show. Any Patreon amount you throw in, $5, $10, $20, whatever you want, everybody will get the links into them. The private YouTube link.
What about 30 cents?
No. $5
minimum. If you try that Perkins move, you don't get to watch nothing.
Can I go Perkins? All right. $5.
All right. Penny, you pour ketchup on it.
I will go ahead and end it there. And everybody email me your Venmo amount. I'm going to put that in the show description. And so if anybody wants to tip anybody here, we'll see what happens.
There
Amazing.
We go. See who gets
It'd
to the
be great
highest
if they only tip Turner.
All right. Goodbye, all.
Thanks. Bye.
Get lost.
I'm going to slide in a quick addendum because I didn't fully address this during the discussion as it seemed a little off topic at the time, but it's been rankling me and I want to get it out of my system. Eric, cue the addendum music. I really don't like it when the New York Times or other media outlets attempt to discredit an idea by tethering it to something sinful. Turner alluded to a New York Times article on tipping. I have not read it, but I feel like I got the gist of it via Turner. And from what I can tell, the Gray Lady made the case that tipping is evil because it's rooted in slavery. Therefore, you must be against tipping or you are pro-slavery. I know Turner said something to that effect at the end, but remember, Turner is a comedian. He is being glib. We're going to give Turner a lot of latitude. With the New York Times, however, what they're doing is akin to a ad hominem argument, a logical fallacy which disqualifies an idea because of the odious character of the idea's originator. When the New York Times or other outlets say that something is effectively sinful because it was born in sin and therefore it must be eschewed, it's relying on fallacious thinking. It's getting to the point where corporate media is effectively signaling right think and wrong think. For example, when an article which is purportedly objective says, filibustering, comma, a Jim Crow era tactic designed to enforce segregation, comma, and then goes on to discuss whatever's happening in the Senate, we know we're not allowed to analyze that thing based on its merits or arguments. It's been preemptively disqualified as evil by the clerisy. What's worse, wrong-think journalists apply fallacious thinking inconsistently. I brought up a couple of times today that the minimum wage laws originated in bigotry, wherein white people wanted to use the force of law to outbid what they perceived as racial competition. But I never see the New York Times or its ilk bring that up, which, again,
This is on the New York Times. I'm not fighting with Turner. He's not here. He can't address any of this. He was being glib, so I'm all on the gray lady. Anyway, I call upon the jury to consider that in their deliberations on tipping, and I remind you that we'll be taking a political orphanage poll on Patreon to that effect. However, I am not going to do the regular song and dance about Patreon at this time as I normally do. And I'll ask that anybody who was going to tip me via Venmo or PayPal refrain from doing so, as I would like to direct your generosity elsewhere. My friend Kristaps Andresen has been on the show a couple of times, once this summer talking about the war in Ukraine, and last month he returned to discuss its causes and how to proceed. I met Kristaps this September in Latvia, where he was kind enough to give me a personal tour of Riga. I consider him a friend and a colleague, and I have a lot of respect for him. He is a proper war journalist covering the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. He is doing real journalism, where you travel to war zones and listen for incoming missiles and interview people. It's much, much harder and riskier than the sort of thing most American podcast hosts get up to, myself included. Last week, Kristaps was injured in a car bombing. Someone, he thinks probably the Wagner Group, a Russian paramilitary organization which has been sending him death threats, put an explosive in his girlfriend's car. His girlfriend is uninjured, and Kristaps survived the assassination attempt and is stable. He took some shrapnel and glass to his legs, but he is expected to fully recover. I immediately emailed Kristaps after I found out about this. A listener of the show alerted me, thank you. And Kristaps responded with the following. Takes more than just exploding cars to keep me down. In fact, I am disappointed. This is just sloppy, 3 out of 10 as far as assassination attempts go. In all seriousness, I'll walk, got extremely lucky with the wounds. Hurts bad though, drinking Jack Daniels and painkillers now. I'm just in a financial pit because we had just gotten the car, but I'll earn the money back. I'll manage, I have to, I need to disagree. I need to disagree with you on some other episode as well. Kristaps is a friend of mine and a friend of the show and a part of our community, and somebody just tried to kill him. So if you were thinking about tipping anybody today over the course of the episode, I'm going to ask you to please direct that to Kristaps. We're probably not going to drum up enough money to buy his girlfriend a new bombless car, but I hope we can at least keep him well stocked with pizza, Jack Daniels, and pornography until he's up and pissing off the Russians again. And if you are one of the many people who actively wants to send resources towards victims of Russian aggression, this is a literal opportunity for you to directly do just that. Real good opportunity to help out a journalist covering war crimes who just got car bombed by a Russian paramilitary group. Kristaps' PayPal address is ihatebalrog@gmail.com. No, I don't know what that means. I've included a link to that in today's episode description. So if you just look at the show notes, the show descriptions on the main feed or Patreon, you will find a link that will direct you there. If you do send Kristaps some car and or booze money, I'd appreciate it if you include "from the orphanage" in your message, as I will score a bunch of friendship points. But also, I want Kristaps to know that he's got a lot of friends on this side of the Atlantic, and I am also actively trying to get him to come visit Texas, in part because I want to see him, but mostly I just want him to take a vacation from everything he's been putting up with this last year. And in Texas, I can confirm that he'll need to be more worried about diabetes and cholesterol than car bombs. So again, that's ihatebalrog, ihatebalrog @gmail.com, which you can support via PayPal, and there is a link in today's episode description. Thank you. Jesus, that was a heavy ending. I think that must be the heaviest goddamn conclusion we've ever done on this entire program. And that's following last week's 10-minute diatribe about alcohol addiction. All right, well, don't worry.
because next week we're going to do an entire week of fun Thinky Time programming, a full week of episodes, a bit like Judge Week, and I've already recorded all of them, and they are delightful. They are interesting and light. Get excited for a whole bunch of fun stuff on the horizon. I am. Been working on it for 6 months. Very excited to share it with you. Thank you, World's Smartest Podcast Network, for coming on to discuss tipping. Mike Kaplan, the great Turner Sparks, and Dr. Andrea Jones-Roy. Thank you, Eric Stipe, who edited today's episode. Until next time, I've been Andrew Heaton, and so have you.